Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another video. So it's been a couple of weeks since I last uploaded. My last video was my final prediction for the 2024 presidential election. And today I'm going to be, kind of doing a post-election analysis of, the accuracy of my prediction. And first of all, I want to say, I was wrong. I was very wrong. Donald Trump did end up winning the presidential election. I got the top line wrong. Now, when I do release videos on my predictions for the House and Senate, I am happy to say that I got a lot better results there. In fact, I did better than I did my predictions for the congressional races this year were better than my predictions for the House and Senate in 2022. I only got 9 House races. I've only gotten 9 House races wrong so far, and it looks like it's going to stay that way. But on the presidential race, I am, a little embarrassed because while I had a pretty good track record in the Senate and the House, the top line result was pretty wrong. So Donald Trump ended up sweeping all 7 battleground states, and he became the first Republican since George W. Bush in 2004 to win the popular vote. Kamala Harris, while she did do better than Hillary Clinton in terms of margins in some of the states like Minnesota, which likely had to do with Tim Walz, New Hampshire, she won by a little bit more. Virginia was pretty solid. But you look at, how did Trump, you might be wondering, how did Trump win the popular vote like this when he won in 2016 with a similar map? Well, the big thing is the margins. You have states like California and New York where he did a lot better than he did, Kamala Harris did a lot worse than Hillary Clinton. These are 2 massive states of large populations. You look at the shift in Florida, the 3rd largest state in the union by population. Trump won it by just 1 point in 2016, then by 3 points 4 years ago. And, just a couple weeks ago, he won it by 13 points. Which was not shocking given the shift in Florida recently, but I mean, this is just absolutely insane to look at. This is a very similar result to the Miami-Dade, to the 2022 election results. But you see, he's basically swept the entire state. It wasn't as big of a margin as Republicans got in 2022, but you look at that, and that already brings down Harris's national vote margin. But also you look at other states, smaller states. You look at New Jersey. New Jersey was within 6 percentage points. This was the closest that a Republican has come to winning it since George H.W. Bush in 1992. Democrats have had signs, not doing well in New Jersey, but they really were at a low point on election night. Obviously, they only won Virginia by about 6 points. They had reduced margins in Colorado and New Mexico. Illinois was almost within, on election night was, Harris was winning it by 4 points when Biden had won it by 17. It looks like Harris is going to win it by around 11 or 12 at the end of the day. But overall, you just see the reductions, the massive margins ramped up in states. Also, don't, forget Texas. Texas, this was a state I was really wrong on. I said Trump was going to win it by 4 or 5. He ended up winning it by almost 14 points, which I did not see coming, and I don't think a lot of people saw coming. So that was a big underestimation of Republican support here in Texas, and it really does push Democrats back here. But you look at that, and then you couple that with the Republican wins in all the battleground states, and it's no wonder that Trump won the popular vote, although this is going to be the slimmest popular vote margin for any candidate since the 2000 election. This is, it's still a win. It's still a historic win for Trump because, now he has received the most votes in a in a nationwide election. That's not something that he could have said in, after 2016 and 2020, but now he can say that. But overall, I'll cut to the chase here. I mean, we've been going for like 5 minutes. So this is my final prediction. I had Kamala Harris winning 287 electoral votes and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance winning 251 electoral votes. Overall, I only got 5 states wrong. But I'm not particularly, salty about this map. I am disappointed in myself, but I think that, obviously I would have liked to be more accurate, but I think you compare it. I guess I'll compare it with this is the map, of the entire nation, based on margin, and you can see that in the battleground states, I was generally not off by all that much. I mean, I had all these states within 1 point. I had all these as toss-ups. But you look at states like Texas, where I had Trump winning by 10 points less than he actually did. You see New York has, shifted down to a likely margin. California is still a, safe blue state, but it's, instead of it being a 30-point margin like it was for Biden, it's a 20-point margin for Harris, which isn't shocking. I mean, we have seen California shift right in the last couple of cycles. But New Jersey, I think, was really an example of Harris losing ground in blue states. I think especially due to the high urban American population and the pushback on Democrats over the war in Gaza. But also, and that also hurt Democrats in states like Michigan. But overall, I got North Carolina and Georgia right. I was a little wrong on the margin, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is getting the winner right, in my opinion. Margin does tell a lot about the state of the race, but at the end of the day, the thing that matters the most is getting the race right. And in that regard, I wasn't too good, and I apologize. Again, I've had a lot of people come at me for this prediction, and I will say, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to do better. I have faith that I will do better because I learned from some of the mistakes I made in the 2022 midterms, and I didn't repeat them this cycle, and that paid off for me. But the presidential race, this is my first time predicting a presidential race, and while I wasn't awful, I wasn't very good. So let's go through each of these states that I got wrong. We'll start off in Nevada. Now, Nevada, I'm not particularly upset about myself. This is the state that I'm really just kind of like, because John Ralston really informed my final prediction here. If you don't know who John Ralston is, he is the editor-in-chief of the Nevada Independent, which is a political, or it's a monthly publication, or I don't know if it's monthly, but it's a newspaper in Las Vegas. And Ralston is known for making incredibly informed and very, very accurate predictions of the statewide elections in Nevada. He called the 2022 Senate race for Catherine Cortez Masto and the governor's race for Joe Lombardo. He's picked the right presidential winner in the state several times, and he said that despite the Republican turnout advantage here, that independents were going to win Nevada the Democrats were going to win independents by enough in Nevada for Harris to win here. And I found his explanation when I read the article before publishing my final prediction. I wasn't enthusiastic about his explanation. I kind of felt like he just said, independents are going to break enough for Harris. He didn't really explain why, though. Or, I would have liked a more detailed explanation. And, he was very, he was not expressing a lot of confidence like he usually does in election cycles. It's not that Democrats didn't do well statewide. I mean, they did, they won the Senate race, they won the free House races, a couple by larger margins than they did 2 years ago. Washoe was pretty, Harris won Washoe. She did well in Carson City. These are two left-trending areas in the state. But Clark was just a disaster for Democrats, and it really shows the shifts that have been happening here among Hispanic voters in Nevada. Trump, this is the only battleground state that he didn't, this is the only one of the 7 battleground states that he didn't win in 2016. Hillary Clinton won Nevada, and then Biden won it by basically the same amount, a little bit less. But Clark has been shifting right. That has been clear over the last couple of election cycles. And I put my faith in Ralston, and, for once he was wrong. And, I have a feeling that he might retire after this. I remember reading his final article, and he was very, apprehensive about continuing this journey, or, he sounded apprehensive, not because of, I think now that he's gotten it wrong, that might give him some incentive, similar to how Ann Sulzer in Iowa, which is another state I didn't really talk about. She's had very good accuracy in Iowa elections, but she predicted Kamala Harris to win by 3 points, over the weekend before the election, and that move encouraged me to move Iowa down to a lean red state. And again, a lot of people gave me flack for this, but I wasn't the only one who was doing it. And I know that, I'm not trying to use diffusion of responsibility here, because other people, made the same decision. But, I could have had Iowa going to Harris, and I would have known that would have been absurd. And I already was kind of skeptical about that Sulzer poll. So, but even if Sulzer was half right, it made sense, Trump would still not be doing very well in the Midwest. And, what ended up happening is Trump actually won Iowa by like 13 points. And it was, a pretty strong, it's what you would expect out of the state. But yeah, that poll really, and that poll also informed my decision to have Democrats pick up a House seat in Iowa, which is one of the 9 races so far that I got wrong. I had Democrats beating Zach Nunn in the 3rd district, kind of, which was informed by that poll, and he won by almost 4 points. In fact, the race with Marion, the 1st district was actually closer. But either way, getting back to the other battleground states that I got wrong, we're going to go to Arizona. If you're going to give me flack about any state, like, Arizona's the one to do it. I was wrong here. I am sorry. For no good reason, I had the state going to Harris. Now, I'll explain it, because there was a reason. I didn't just do this based on totally vibes. What I did it based on was that I had a very, very hard time imagining a lot of the voters in Maricopa County who had just vehemently bucked Trump time and time again in the MAGA brand, had voted Democratic, free, Senate, for free, in free Senate elections in a row. Had elected a governor in 2022, Katie Hobbs, against Kari Lake, despite the polls showing her up and Hobbs not really campaigning. Granted, I don't think she gets enough credit because she was a statewide elected official. I think a lot of people cast her out as a nobody, and it's like, okay, she didn't want to run a great campaign, but at the same time she won, and she was a statewide, she was the attorney general or secretary of state of the of Arizona beforehand. So either way, I just found it very hard to believe that Trump was going to win this state, or win it by the margins that the polls were saying. But really, I mean, these same polls were showing Ruben Gallego winning the Senate race comfortably. And it was kind of hypocritical of me to use those polls to inform my decision for Ruben Gallego and not for Trump in, the presidential race. For a while, I did have this state actually going Republican, but it was in my final prediction where, I flipped it back to Democratic. I did put out, I think, my second to last prediction was like a community post or something, but for a while, the weeks leading up, the final weeks, I did have Trump winning Arizona, and I made a mistake and changed it to Harris at the last minute. But I think this really, you look at the shifts that, the gains that Trump made with Hispanic voters in this election, and it's just unbelievable. I mean, he still lost the Latino vote to Harris, but it was like within, like a couple, it was basically tied. And that's just unbelievable to me because, we thought that Biden did badly with Latino voters in 2020. No, I mean, this is bad. And, you just go look at the Rio Grande Valley and how, the shifts there just continued, without fail. I thought that, the shifts were going to be more incremental, as 2022 had suggested. But no, I mean, it got a lot worse for Democrats there. And that's part of the reason why Texas was such a large margin. But either way, the border was really just an awful issue for the Harris campaign, which was noted throughout, the campaign season. But this looked like, it was going to be Harris's hardest battleground state. And I agreed it was going to be the one of the harder ones. But I just really thought, Democrats have had such a great winning streak here. I don't think that the delta between Harris and Gallego is going to be as large as some people are expecting. I think that Trump still has a lot of weaknesses here. He's not running a campaign that's, very tailored to the Arizona voter. But the border issue, and I think just the labeling, the way that illegal immigration was really turned on Kamala Harris, I think it really worked. And I think, Republicans made a lot of gains here. They held on to both their House seats, but, they still lost that Senate race, which was partially because Ruben Gallego was a great candidate, or, a really good candidate, but also because Carrie Lake was just an awful one. An awful one. I'm sorry, I'm like slurring my words. So we'll go to Wisconsin next. Wisconsin, honestly, was not that bad for Harris compared to the rest of these states. This was the closest state in the Rust Belt. It was the closest state in the entire election, which is weird because while the polls for years in presidential races have said that Wisconsin was always going to be bluer than Michigan and Pennsylvania, in 2016 and 2020, it was, Trump came closer to winning it, or, in the case of 2016, had won it by the largest margin out of these free states. And that turned out to be the opposite of what happened here. Pennsylvania was actually the reddest of these states, then it was Michigan, then it was Wisconsin. And I think part of that was because turnout in Detroit and Philadelphia was awful for Democrats. But Milwaukee, honestly, and Madison and Milwaukee were pretty good for Democrats. And I think, Harris held her own in the WOW counties, kind of continued some of the shifts from Biden, incrementally, not a lot. But she lost a lot of ground in the working class suburbs and, in the working class areas, the driftless region, and didn't do too well in the suburbs, that were in the WOW counties. Didn't do great in Green Bay. She did win Door County, which is something that Hillary Clinton did not do. So, again, Kamala Harris, not necessarily, a worse candidate than Hillary Clinton in some aspects, or in, according to some details. You have to remember Hillary Clinton had like a whole 2 years to run for president, had announced her campaign in 2015. Harris had to put this all together in 3 months. And honestly, it's not like a terrible showing. I mean, it's a terrible showing, but, for the circumstances, I think in retrospect, it was kind of hard to see. Just because Biden had been running such a terrible campaign. But either way, Wisconsin really, sums it up. Michigan, this is one that I felt good about keeping this race in the toss-up column because a lot of people were getting really confident that Harris was going to win this state. A lot of people moved it, like LTE and Understand Politics, who are both great, election YouTubers. Go check them out. But they put they put Michigan in the lean D column, and I was more cautious. I wanted to, keep this state in the tilt Democratic column, and while I was still wrong, I do kind of find some peace in the fact that I had it a little bit closer than some other people. But Kamala Harris overall did terrible, she lost Saginaw, county that Biden won in 2020. She did worse in the Lansing area. She lost Dearborn, Michigan, which, is a very heavily Arab American community that Biden won by 40 points in 2020, and she lost it by 6. And Detroit, Wayne County, she didn't even win it by 30. And Biden won this by like 40 last time, so that tells you anything. She did okay in Grand Rapids. She won it by 5 points, a little bit less than Biden, but, she didn't win Muskegon, or, obviously she didn't win Ottawa. Overall, I think, Democrats got really lucky in that Senate race because there was an undervote for the GOP in that state. If Mike Rogers had gotten the same turnout as, Donald Trump here, he would be senator-elect right now. In fact, if you go to that state, Slotkin got more votes. Did she get more votes? No, she didn't. But she got pretty close to as many votes as Kamala Harris, around 30,000 short. And she was a strong candidate, and Democrats got really lucky here. But overall, I think the Arab American, the war in Gaza was a big kicker. I think it was also Trump's focus on, electric vehicles and, being against the, production and, sale of, electric vehicles. Michigan, the Detroit, it's obviously, Detroit's obviously Motown. It's the, biggest state with the biggest auto manufacturing, industry in the country. And so I think that really sat, that really, I think Democrats, pushed towards clean energy and that, sent in that idea, and with electric cars and renewable energy, just wasn't buying it. Not even renewable energy, just electric cars in general, because it was kind of against, Michigan's way of, a lot of these people's way of life. And Trump just did better in the working class areas. And, compared to the squeaker that he won Michigan by in 2016, I mean, this is a pretty good result for him. So finally we come down to Pennsylvania, the last state that I got wrong. And Pennsylvania was pretty bad for Harris. I remember sitting up on election night watching the results come in, and when Steve Kornacki I was watching on MSNBC, and I remember seeing Steve Kornacki point out Pennsylvania and the margin that Harris had in Lackawanna County, which is where Scranton is. This is by Joe Biden's hometown. Biden won this county by almost 9 points in 2020. And, we saw, I think Harris was up by like 3, and that was an eerily similar number to Hillary Clinton's margin here in 2016. And I think that was the moment that I realized that I was going to be wrong about the presidential race. And, Harris won it by less. She won it by less. And Trump cracked 20% in, Philadelphia. He did even, a little bit better in some of these Philadelphia suburbs, honestly. I mean, Chester County was only 14 percentage points, it was only a 14 percentage point margin for Harris. He did win Erie County, which made sense. Allegheny was still pretty strong for Harris. She won Lehigh, but Trump won Monroe, which is not something he did in 2016. He won Northampton back. He won Bucks County, by like less than 300 votes. And overall, Republicans had a phenomenal election, a phenomenal night in Pennsylvania. They beat Bob Casey in that Senate race. Dave McCormick, projected just a couple of days ago to be, officially the senator-elect from the state. And I mean, Casey's just, we'll talk about this more because, in the next video, but overall, same deal as Michigan and Wisconsin, terrible turnout from the big, Philadelphia, from the big urban centers, Harris sliding with working class voters, that kind of gig. North Carolina was kind of uneventful in comparison. I mean, it wasn't a great state for Trump in all, fairness. I think he won it by a little bit less than he did in 2016. But overall, pretty, relate or kind of, what's the word? Kind of expected result here. Harris did okay in, Wake, in the Raleigh suburbs. She did okay in Charlotte. But I think what really killed her chances here was just, first of all, the fact that, North Carolina was the only one of these states that Trump had won in 2020. And two, Democrats lost a lot of ground with rural black, in historically rural, historically, African American counties up here in the northeastern part of the state. The Democratic incumbent in the House race, though, Don Davis, did manage to hold on, but barely. And that was a race that I was very proud of with my prediction. But Harris did okay in Guilford County. She did okay in Mecklenburg and Cabarrus and Union County, the Charlotte area. She did, and she basically matched Biden's numbers in Asheville, which honestly is a little surprising to me. I figured that with Hurricane Helene really ravaging the area, that we would have seen a little bit of depressed turnout here. I'd have to compare this to the 2020 numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head, but overall, this election was less turnout than did have a lower turnout than 2020. Still a lot though. Still almost more than 100 million Americans cast their ballots, and I'd say it was still a pretty high turnout election. But overall, North Carolina just kind of Democrats getting close, but never really being able to. Are never really able to cut into the margins that Republicans have in order to win here. They did win that governor's race with Mark Robinson, Josh Stein, destroying Mark Robinson there. Not very surprising, but Democrats also won the Secretary of State race, the Attorney General's race. It was just the presidential race that was really, the kicker for them. And also, Republicans redrew the House line so that they, the congressional maps in the state so that they would gain 3 seats. They could have gained a 4th with Davis's seat, but of course he won. So then, that leaves us with Georgia. And Georgia, honestly, Georgia and North Carolina, for all intents and purposes, were not that bad for Harris. Like, Georgia was actually closer than Nevada. Keep in mind, I had Harris winning Nevada, so, not Alabama. No, we do not need to go to Alabama. Georgia, overall, if you compare some of the, margins in the Atlanta metro area, you either see Harris expanding her margin, like in Henry County. I think she won this by like 21, or Biden won this by 21 in 2020, and Harris won it by 30. Excuse me. I believe Biden won Gwinnett County by like 18, 19 points. So Harris did have a little bit of reduction there, but she held her own in Cobb County. She did okay in Douglas, and, she brought Fayette County down from a 7-point margin for Trump to a 3-point margin. Fulton here, though, was the real kicker. This was another one that was really, that Steve Kornacki pointed out on election night. Biden had a 46-point win here, a margin of victory here. And Harris only got about 45, and given the lower turnout, and the wider electorate here, which was kind of clear from some of the early voting data, which informed my decision to move it to being Republican. Overall, I would say Georgia, not a terrible state for my prediction. I feel pretty good about it, especially because it wasn't one of the states that I got wrong. But overall, shows, that even in this pretty red environment, not that Democrats didn't do well down the ballot. They did okay in the Senate and the House, but not as well as some people expected. But overall, Georgia, compared to some of these battleground states, it really does show some movement towards the Democrats long term. And I think that, should midterm history hold, they're going to have a pretty good Democrats are going to have a pretty good cycle here in 2026. They have a Senate race, they have a governor's race, and they have an incumbent senator up. So that'll be the test, really. Georgia's still a very, competitive state. Obviously, flip back to the Republicans here, but the margin, given the rest of these states, honestly, you would think it'd be a little bit higher. But either way, point is, when we look down, when we look at it, at all the data here, I was very wrong about this race, and I apologize to to everyone, because I try to make predictions as I don't try to base it off of my personal beliefs. Obviously, my bias does get in the way sometimes, but that's true for any politically focused person or anyone. We all have our biases, and we just have to try and hold them at bay as much as possible. And that doesn't mean that they don't infect us. And at the end of the day, I think the states that I'm the most proud of, with my prediction, are Wisconsin, Michigan, in terms of the margin. Of course, I did have these states in pretty close, in a pretty close, what's the word? Pretty close place. I think the worst states for my prediction were Arizona, and Georgia also. Georgia was a good state. Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan. Even though I was wrong about these states, I feel better about them than some of these other states. But North Carolina and Georgia were the highlights. The worst states for my prediction were Arizona by a mile out of the battleground states. This one you can throw pitchforks at me for, because I completely disregarded all the data here and put too much focus on historical context here. Texas was awful. Iowa was awful. Florida was, I don't know, Florida was okay. Minnesota was not great. New Hampshire was not great. Overall, not my best map, and I hope to do better in 4 years. But thank you all so much for, watching this video. Thank you for being on this journey with me. I'm going to continue, I'll make, I think, a joint video sometime this weekend, discussing the Senate, my errors in the Senate and House predictions, because that's a much smaller, group of races to cover. I just wanted to make this video about the presidential race, so thank you all for watching. Tell me how, if you made a prediction, how, inaccurate were you? And let me know down in the comments below. Did you get 5 states wrong, or did you, were you right that Trump was going to win, or did you think, like me, that Harris was going to win? I want to know, how you guys, predicted things, and, just leave your prediction down in the comments below, or, if that's too much, you can just put a link to your video, if you've made a video, that shows your prediction. Either way, thank you all for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video if you're, someone who you think would enjoy it. And, yeah, I really appreciate you guys, and, I'll see you guys, next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.